Life is a mosaic of small decisions, each a thread in the tapestry of our destiny. Sometimes what seems like a minor gesture, a smile, a helping hand, or offering a seat on a crowded subway can ripple outward and transform lives in unimaginable ways. Today, I'll share a story that underscores the timeless value of compassion. A tale where kindness sparked a chain reaction of hope, resilience, and inspiration. Picture this: a man at his lowest point, weighed down by life's burdens, and a pregnant woman in need of a simple gesture of empathy. What happened next not only changed their lives, but also touched an entire community. This story is not just about one man's journey. It's about the power we all hold to create a brighter world through acts of kindness. As we dive into this poignant tale, I encourage you to reflect on the power of small gestures in your own life. And if this story touches your heart, consider subscribing to this channel for more narratives that inspire and uplift. Also, share your own words of encouragement in the comments below. Write something like, "I choose kindness and believe in its power to transform lives." Let's build a community where empathy thrives. Lucas Allen was a man who believed in hard work. A mechanic by trade, he had spent the past 15 years in a bustling Detroit auto plant, his hands bringing life to machines that powered the nation. To him, his work wasn't just a job, it was his identity. But one fateful morning, Lucas's world was turned upside down. The auto plant, once a symbol of stability, announced its sudden closure, a victim of shifting economic tides and automation. The news hit like a thunderclap. Lucas, along with hundreds of others, was handed a severance package that felt more like a condolence card. The plant had been more than a workplace. It was a second home, a source of pride and his anchor. Now he was adrift, staring into the abyss of unemployment with bills piling up and no clear path forward. As days turned into weeks, Lucas felt the weight of despair settling on his shoulders. He had a modest apartment, a truck that needed repairs, and a life he had built brick by brick, all now in jeopardy. Every job application felt like a shot in the dark. Each rejection chipped away at his confidence. Even a trip to the grocery store became a reminder of his dwindling savings. The nights were the hardest. Lying awake in his small, cluttered bedroom, Lucas wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. How long could he hold on? What would he do if the money ran out? The quiet of the room was broken only by the faint hum of the city outside, a city that seemed to move forward without him. But beneath the despair, there was a spark. Lucas was not the kind of man to give up easily. He had faced hardships before growing up in a working-class family, enduring lean times when the plant had cut hours, and surviving a bout with pneumonia that had nearly taken him out of commission for good. Yet this felt different. This was an existential crisis, a test not just of his resilience, but of his very identity. One chilly November morning, as Lucas walked to the subway station, he found himself observing the world with new eyes. He noticed the weary faces of commuters, the hurried pace of a city too busy to stop, and the occasional act of kindness. A man helping a stranger carry a heavy bag, a woman giving her scarf to a homeless man shivering on the corner. It stirred something in him, a faint echo of hope. The subway had always been a lifeline for Lucas, a way to get to work without the hassle of parking or traffic. But now, it was a lifeline in a different sense. The crowded cars were a microcosm of humanity, a reminder that he was not alone in his struggles. Each face told a story, and in some of those faces, he saw reflections of his own pain. That morning, as Lucas boarded the train, he found a seat near the door and settled in. His mind wandered as the train rumbled through the tunnels, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels almost hypnotic. He thought about his father, a factory worker who had taught him the value of integrity and perseverance. He thought about his late mother, whose gentle words had always been a source of comfort. He thought about the life he had envisioned for himself, a life that now felt like a distant dream. The train stopped abruptly, and more passengers filed in. Among them was a woman who immediately caught Lucas's attention. She was visibly pregnant, her face etched with exhaustion, and she clutched a small bag as she looked around for a seat. The train was packed, and no one seemed to notice her plight. People were glued to their phones or lost in their own worlds. Lucas hesitated for a moment, his own fatigue tempting him to stay seated. But then he remembered his mother's voice. "Lucas, always choose to be kind, even when it's inconvenient." He stood up and gestured to the woman. "Ma'am, you can take my seat," he said, his voice firm but warm. The woman looked at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Oh, thank you so much," she said, carefully lowering herself into the seat. Lucas nodded and grabbed a pole to steady himself. As the train resumed its journey, he couldn't help but notice the relief in her eyes. It was a simple act, but it felt significant. The woman introduced herself as Grace. She was a schoolteacher, 8 months along, and commuting to a doctor's appointment. She mentioned how difficult it had been to navigate the city in her condition, and how much she appreciated his kindness. Lucas smiled, brushing off her gratitude with a modest, "It's the least I could do." As they talked, Lucas found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in weeks. He shared his story, his struggles, and the uncertainty that loomed over his future. Grace listened intently, her empathy palpable. "You know," she said, "it takes a good heart to offer a seat when you're carrying so much on your own shoulders." Her words struck a chord with Lucas. For the first time in weeks, he felt seen, not just as a man down on his luck, but as someone who still had value to offer the world. The train reached Grace's stop, and as she stood to leave, she handed him a card. "My husband runs a construction company," she said. "They're looking for people. Tell him Grace sent you. He'll listen." Lucas stared at the card in his hand, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. Could this chance encounter be the turning point he so desperately needed? Lucas could never have predicted how this small gesture, simple act of offering his seat, would change the trajectory of his life. In the next chapter, we'll follow Lucas as he takes the first steps toward rebuilding his world and discovers the unexpected power of human connection. Lucas held the business card in his hand long after Grace had exited the train, her words lingering in his mind like a melody he couldn't shake. "Tell him Grace sent you." It was a lifeline, but also a challenge. He had spent the past weeks wallowing in the uncertainty of his situation, paralyzed by the fear of rejection and the weight of his own doubts. Yet, here was a complete stranger, someone with her own struggles, who saw something in him worth betting on. He folded the card carefully, slipping it into his wallet as if it were a rare gem. The day carried on, but Lucas found himself distracted. He replayed the encounter in his mind, thinking about Grace's kindness and the unexpected connection they had shared in that brief span of time. He wondered about her life, her struggles, and the challenges of being heavily pregnant in a city that rarely paused for anyone. Her words, simple as they were, had lit a spark of courage within him. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the road but the beginning of something new. The next morning, Lucas stood in front of his bathroom mirror, his reflection staring back at him with a mix of weariness and resolve. He adjusted the collar of his shirt and ran a comb through his hair, trying to look presentable. The business card sat on the counter, its corners slightly worn from his repeated handling. Today, he decided, he would make the call. The phone rang 3 times before a deep, steady voice answered. "Hello, this is Martin Davis." Lucas took a breath, his palms clammy. "Hi, Mr. Davis. My name is Lucas Allen. I met your wife, Grace, on the subway yesterday. She mentioned your construction company might be hiring, and she suggested I reach out." There was a brief pause, and Lucas's heart raced. Then Martin's tone softened. "Ah, yes, Grace told me about you. She doesn't usually hand out my card unless she sees something special in someone. Why don't you come by the office this afternoon? We can talk." Lucas felt a surge of relief and anxiety all at once. He thanked Martin and hung up, his mind already racing with questions. Would he measure up? Was this just a polite courtesy? He had no idea what to expect, but the fact that he was even taking this step felt like a victory. The construction company was housed in a modest brick building on the outskirts of the city. As Lucas walked in, he was greeted by the sounds of hammers and saws, a symphony of productivity that reminded him of his days at the auto plant. Martin met him in the front office, a tall man with a firm handshake and an air of quiet authority. The interview began with the usual questions: Lucas's experience, his skills, and why he was interested in the job. But soon, the conversation shifted. Martin leaned back in his chair, studying Lucas with an intensity that made him feel both scrutinized and understood. "Grace told me you're going through a tough time," Martin said. "I've been there myself. Lost my first business when the housing market crashed. Took years to rebuild, but you know what got me through it? People who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Lucas nodded, the vulnerability in Martin's words resonating deeply. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't just another applicant. He was a person, someone whose story mattered. By the end of the interview, Martin extended his hand once more. "I'm willing to take a chance on you, Lucas. Start Monday morning at 7. Welcome to the team." The words hit Lucas like a wave of warmth. As he walked out of the office, he felt a lightness in his step that had been absent for months. He couldn't wait to share the news with Grace, to thank her for the kindness that had set this all in motion. On Monday morning, Lucas arrived at the construction site early, determined to prove himself. The work was hard, physically demanding in ways he hadn't experienced before. But there was a rhythm to it, a sense of purpose that reignited the spark of pride he had lost. The crew welcomed him with a mix of curiosity and camaraderie, their laughter and banter making the long hours feel less daunting. Over time, Lucas found himself growing into the role, his confidence slowly rebuilding brick by brick. Martin became both a mentor and a friend, sharing wisdom that extended beyond the job site. "Life's a construction project, Lucas," he said one afternoon as they worked side by side. "You lay the foundation with the values you hold dear. When storms come, and they always will, it's those values that keep everything standing." Grace occasionally stopped by the site, her baby bump now gone, replaced by a tiny, swaddled bundle of life. She always greeted Lucas with a warm smile and asked how he was doing. Her presence was a reminder of the subway encounter that had changed everything, a moment that seemed both distant and vividly present. Lucas often reflected on how a simple act offering his seat had set this chain of events in motion. It wasn't just the job or the financial stability it brought. It was the restoration of his faith in humanity and, most importantly, in himself. He realized that kindness was more than a virtue. It was a force that could alter the trajectory of a life, creating ripples that extended far beyond the initial act. As Lucas settled into his new normal, he began to think about ways he could pay it forward. The kindness he had received was a gift, and gifts, he believed, were meant to be shared. He started noticing opportunities to help others. A colleague who needed a ride, a neighbor struggling to carry groceries, a young man at the bus stop looking lost. Each gesture, no matter how small, felt like a way to honor the kindness that had brought him back to life. And so Lucas's journey took on a new dimension. The subway ride that had begun as a routine commute had become a turning point, a reminder that life's most profound moments often come in the guise of the ordinary. Lucas's story was far from over. In the next chapter, we'll see how his newfound hope and resilience lead him to an unexpected opportunity to make an even greater impact, proving that the ripples of kindness can extend further than anyone imagines. Lucas's routine at the construction site brought a new rhythm to his days, one he hadn't felt since his time at the auto plant. The sweat on his brow and the ache in his muscles were constant reminders that he was working towards something meaningful again. Yet beyond the satisfaction of labor, it was the camaraderie that began to heal his wounded spirit. The crew became a surrogate family, each person bringing their unique personality to the site, some with endless jokes, others with quiet wisdom. Lucas felt himself coming alive in their presence, learning from their resilience and adding his own story to the mix. One afternoon, during a break, Lucas sat on an overturned bucket with Martin. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the half-finished building they were working on. Martin handed Lucas a water bottle, his tone casual but curious. "You've been here a couple of months now, Lucas. You're fitting in well. I can tell you're not just here for a paycheck. What's driving you these days?" Lucas took a long sip of water, the question hanging in the air. He looked out at the scaffolding, the beams that had been meticulously laid down that morning. "It's about more than rebuilding my life," he said after a pause. "It's about feeling like I matter again. When Grace handed me your card, I was at rock bottom. But her kindness and yours showed me there's still good in the world. Still something worth fighting for. I guess I'm just trying to live up to that now." Martin nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's a solid foundation, my friend. When you start building on values like gratitude and purpose, you'll find the sky's the limit." His words resonated deeply with Lucas, fueling a quiet determination that grew with each passing day. Meanwhile, Lucas found himself drawn to the people in his neighborhood in ways he hadn't before. One evening, as he returned from work, he noticed a group of teenagers hanging out near the bus stop. Their laughter echoed down the street, but there was an undercurrent of restlessness in their energy. Lucas recognized it. It was the same aimless frustration he had felt in his youth, before he discovered the dignity of hard work. Instead of walking past, he stopped and struck up a conversation. "You guys waiting for the bus?" he asked, his voice easy but inviting. One of the teens, a tall boy with a defiant look in his eye, shrugged. "Nah, just hanging out." Lucas nodded, sensing the barriers the boy had erected around himself. "You know," he said, "I used to hang out like this too, back when I didn't know what I wanted from life. Then someone took a chance on me, gave me a job, and everything started to change." The teens listened, some more attentively than others, as Lucas shared a bit of his story. He didn't preach or lecture. He simply offered a glimpse into a life that had been transformed by opportunity and effort. By the end of the conversation, the tall boy whose name was Jordan asked, "So how do you even start? Like, what if nobody's giving you that chance?" Lucas smiled, recognizing the hunger for guidance in Jordan's voice. "Sometimes you have to create your own chance," he said. "But if you're serious, I might be able to help. Come by the site tomorrow after school. I'll introduce you to Martin. He's always looking for apprentices who are ready to work hard." The next day, Jordan showed up, hesitant but determined. Lucas introduced him to Martin, who agreed to let the boy shadow the crew for a week to see if he had the grit for the job. Watching Jordan wield a hammer for the first time brought a sense of fulfillment Lucas hadn't anticipated. It was as if the kindness he had received from Grace and Martin was now flowing through him, creating ripples of its own. Jordan's presence on the site became a bright spot in Lucas's days. The boy's eagerness to learn and his steady improvement reminded Lucas of his younger self, full of untapped potential waiting for the right moment to shine. Lucas took Jordan under his wing, teaching him not just the technical skills of the trade, but also the values that made the work meaningful: integrity, teamwork, and perseverance. As the weeks passed, Lucas began to see more than just a job site taking shape. He saw lives being built his own, Jordan's, and even the community's. The buildings they constructed weren't just structures. They were symbols of renewal, places where families would grow, businesses would thrive, and dreams would be born. One evening, as Lucas walked home, he reflected on how far he had come. The subway ride that had led to Grace and Martin felt like a lifetime ago, yet its impact was as fresh as ever. He thought about how one small act offering his seat had set in motion a series of events that had not only saved his life, but had given it a new purpose. Yet, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to be done. The construction site and his mentorship of Jordan were just the beginning. He started brainstorming ways to extend the reach of the kindness he had experienced. Maybe there were others like Jordan, young people searching for direction, who just needed someone to believe in them. That night, Lucas sat at his kitchen table, sketching out ideas on a notepad. He envisioned a community center where people could learn trades, find mentorship, and connect with others who believed in second chances. It was an ambitious dream, one that would require resources and support he didn't yet have. But Lucas had learned something valuable. The smallest steps often lead to the greatest journeys. Lucas's dream of building a community center would face challenges and triumphs in equal measure. In the next chapter, we'll see how his determination to pay kindness forward leads to an opportunity that will change not only his life, but also the lives of countless others. Lucas's vision for a community center quickly became more than an idea, it became a mission. Each night, after long hours at the construction site, he found himself poring over plans, scribbling notes, and researching local resources. His kitchen table turned into a makeshift office cluttered with papers, coffee cups, and a growing pile of community grant applications. What Lucas lacked in formal experience, he made up for with determination. He knew the importance of having a place where people like Jordan, or like himself, not so long ago, could find guidance, support, and hope. One evening, Martin noticed Lucas lingering after work, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "You've been distracted lately," Martin said, handing Lucas a cold bottle of water. "Something on your mind?" Lucas hesitated for a moment before sharing his vision. He explained the community center idea, his hopes for offering training programs, and the dream of creating a space where no one felt overlooked or left behind. As he spoke, his passion became clear, his words flowing with conviction. Martin listened intently, nodding as Lucas laid out his ideas. "That's a big dream," Martin said finally, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and caution. "But big dreams are worth chasing. You're not alone in this, Lucas. You've got people who believe in you. Start small, build the foundation, and the rest will come." Encouraged by Martin's support, Lucas began sharing his vision with others in the community. He spoke to local business owners, attended town hall meetings, and even reached out to the city council. To his surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People were inspired by his story, drawn to his authenticity and the raw sincerity of his purpose. They saw in him a man who had faced hardship but emerged with a resolve to lift others. One key moment came during a neighborhood association meeting. Lucas had been invited to speak, and as he stood in front of the small crowd, he felt a familiar knot of nerves. But then he remembered Grace's encouragement, Martin's mentorship, and the way Jordan's life had already begun to change. He took a deep breath and began. "I'm not a politician or a businessman," he said, his voice steady. "I'm just a guy who knows what it feels like to lose everything and have someone believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. That belief saved my life, and I want to pass it on. This community center isn't just my dream, it's our dream. A place where kindness isn't just a word but an action, where people find the tools to rebuild their lives, just like I did." The room erupted in applause. People came forward, pledging donations, volunteering their time, and offering connections to potential sponsors. Lucas was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, but he also knew this was just the beginning. With funding starting to trickle in, Lucas and Martin gathered a small team to begin renovating an old, abandoned building on the edge of the neighborhood. The structure had once been a bustling community hall but had fallen into disrepair over the years. For Lucas, it was the perfect symbol of renewal, a chance to breathe life into something that had been forgotten. Much like his own journey, the work was grueling but rewarding. Lucas's construction skills proved invaluable as he led the team in clearing debris, repairing walls, and installing new fixtures. Jordan, who had become a full-fledged apprentice by now, worked tirelessly by his side, his youthful energy a stark contrast to Lucas's methodical determination. Other volunteers joined in, from retired tradespeople eager to pass on their knowledge to local artists who painted vibrant murals on the walls, turning the space into a beacon of hope. As the opening day of the community center approached, Lucas reflected on how far he had come. He thought about the subway ride where it all began, the weight of despair that had been lifted by Grace's simple act of kindness. That moment had set off a chain reaction, leading him to Martin, the construction job, Jordan, and now this, an entire community rallying around a shared dream. The grand opening was a celebration unlike anything the neighborhood had seen in years. Families filled the newly renovated space, exploring the classrooms, workshop areas, and a small library stocked with donated books. Lucas stood at the center of it all, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Grace and Martin were there, of course, beaming with joy as they watched the fruits of their encouragement flourish. Even Grace's husband, holding their infant daughter, shook Lucas's hand with heartfelt congratulations. During the opening ceremony, Lucas took the stage to address the crowd. "This place," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "isn't just about tools and training. It's about second chances. It's about believing in the power of kindness to transform lives. Every beam, every nail, Every stroke of paint in this building is a testament to what happens when people come together with a shared purpose. This is just the beginning of what we can achieve together. The applause was thunderous, but Lucas knew the real work was only just beginning. Over the following months, the community center became a hub of activity. People of all ages came to learn new skills, find mentorship, or simply connect with others who understood their struggles. Lucas spent his days teaching workshops, mentoring young people, and organizing events that brought the neighborhood closer together. One afternoon, as Lucas watched Jordan lead a group of teenagers in a carpentry class, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what it meant to pay kindness forward, to create something that would outlast him and continue to grow. But fate had more in store for Lucas. Word of the community center's success began to spread beyond the neighborhood, catching the attention of a local journalist. She reached out to Lucas, wanting to tell his story, a story of resilience, compassion, and the transformative power of human connection. At first, Lucas was hesitant. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight. But Martin convinced him. "Your story isn't just yours anymore," Martin said. "It belongs to everyone who needs a reminder that there's always hope." The article was published a week later, accompanied by photos of Lucas, the community center, and the smiling faces of the people it served. It quickly gained traction, shared across social media, and picked up by larger news outlets. Lucas found himself inundated with messages of support, gratitude, and offers to expand his work to other parts of the city. Lucas's story was spreading far and wide, but it was the next chapter of his journey that would truly test his resolve and show the world just how powerful an act of kindness could be. The article about Lucas and the community center quickly gained attention, turning him into an unexpected local figure of inspiration. At first, he found it surreal. Strangers approached him on the street to shake his hand or share their own stories of struggle and hope. Emails flooded in from across the city. Some were from people asking how they could help, while others shared how Lucas's journey had reignited their belief in humanity. Lucas had never imagined his story could resonate so deeply, but the outpouring of support affirmed one thing: kindness, no matter how small, truly had the power to ripple outward. The newfound attention wasn't without its challenges. As more people heard about the community center, the demand for its resources grew exponentially. Lucas found himself stretched thin, juggling his work as a mentor, a handyman, and now, the face of a movement he hadn't planned to lead. Still, he refused to let the momentum falter. He began organizing workshops on weekends, bringing in local professionals to teach skills, ranging from carpentry and electrical work to resume building and financial literacy. The center evolved from a space for learning trades into a sanctuary for empowerment, a place where people could find both practical tools and emotional support. Jordan, who had grown from a restless teenager into a confident apprentice, became one of Lucas's greatest allies. He took on more responsibilities at the center, often running the carpentry classes and mentoring younger kids who reminded him of his own struggles. Watching Jordan thrive filled Lucas with pride, a reminder that his efforts were bearing fruit in ways he couldn't have imagined. But Lucas wasn't content to stop there. The recognition from the article had sparked something within him, a desire to expand the reach of what they were doing. He began brainstorming ways to take the message of kindness and second chances to a larger audience. During one of their late-night conversations, Martin suggested, "What if you started an initiative? Something that goes beyond this building. You've already proven how much impact a single act of kindness can have. Why not inspire others to do the same?" The idea stuck with Lucas. Over the next few weeks, he developed a campaign called Kindness in Action. The premise was simple but powerful. Encourage people to commit small acts of goodwill and share their stories to inspire others. Lucas believed that kindness, like a flame, could spread infinitely if people saw its potential. With the help of volunteers, he launched a website where participants could pledge to perform acts of kindness, share their experiences, and connect with others who were doing the same. The campaign took off in ways Lucas never expected. Social media became a powerful tool, with posts tagged #kindness-in-action flooding timelines. People shared stories of paying for a stranger's groceries, helping a neighbor with yard work, or simply taking the time to listen to someone in need. Schools adopted the initiative as part of their curriculum, encouraging students to brainstorm and execute acts of kindness in their communities. Even local businesses got involved, offering discounts to customers who participated in the movement. As the campaign grew, Lucas found himself traveling across Detroit to speak at schools, community events, and even corporate gatherings. His message was always the same: kindness is not just an ideal, it's a practice, a choice that can transform lives in ways you may never see. He shared his own story of offering a seat on the subway and how that seemingly insignificant act had set off a chain reaction that changed his life. "You never know how far a ripple will travel," he often said. But it always starts with one small gesture. One of the most poignant moments came during an event at a local high school. After Lucas's speech, a young girl approached him, her eyes filled with tears. She explained how she had been feeling invisible at school, struggling with loneliness and self-doubt. Inspired by the campaign, a classmate had written her a heartfelt note of encouragement, letting her know she was seen and valued. "That note saved me," she said quietly. "It reminded me that people care." Stories like this reinforced Lucas's belief in the power of his work. He saw firsthand how the movement was creating a ripple effect, far beyond what he could have imagined. But with success came new challenges. The increased visibility brought skeptics who questioned his motives, critics who dismissed his efforts as idealistic or naive. Lucas faced these doubts with the same quiet resolve that had carried him through his darkest days. He knew his intentions were pure, and the results spoke for themselves. The community center, now thriving more than ever, became a beacon for those seeking second chances. It expanded its offerings to include counseling services, support groups, and partnerships with local businesses to provide job placement opportunities. Lucas often reflected on how far they had come from a dream, scribbled on a notepad, to a fully realized hub of hope and transformation. One evening, as Lucas prepared to lock up the center, he heard a familiar voice behind him. It was Grace, holding the hand of her now toddler daughter. "You've created something incredible here, Lucas," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It's amazing to think all of this started with one small moment on a subway." Lucas smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "It wasn't just me," he said. "It was you and Martin and everyone who believed in what we could do together. Kindness has a way of multiplying." As Grace left, Lucas stood in the quiet of the empty center, his mind racing with plans for the future. He knew there was still so much to do, so many lives to touch, but for the first time in years, he felt at peace with the journey ahead. Lucas's movement was growing, and with it, a renewed sense of hope was spreading across the city. But a chance encounter at an upcoming event would remind him of just how interconnected our lives truly are, and how kindness always comes full circle. As kindness in action gained momentum, the movement began to attract attention from larger platforms beyond Detroit. Social media buzzed with testimonials and updates. But it wasn't until a local television station aired a feature about Lucas's work that the initiative truly went viral. The segment highlighted not only the community center and its programs, but also Lucas's personal story, his struggles, his chance meeting with Grace, and the incredible ripple effect that followed. Within days, his inbox was flooded with invitations from organizations and individuals wanting to partner with him. The overwhelming response was both humbling and exhilarating. One message, however, stood out. It came from a national nonprofit dedicated to promoting community-led change. They were hosting an annual gala in Chicago, celebrating ordinary people who had made extraordinary contributions to their communities. The email invited Lucas to be one of the keynote speakers, alongside other inspiring figures from across the country. Initially, Lucas hesitated. Public speaking had never been his strong suit, and the thought of addressing a high-profile audience filled him with doubt. But Martin, ever the voice of encouragement, insisted he seize the opportunity. "This isn't about you, Lucas," he said. "It's about the message. People need to hear it." The night of the gala arrived, and Lucas found himself standing backstage, nervously adjusting his tie. The ballroom was packed with hundreds of attendees, their chatter filling the air with anticipation. When his name was announced, a wave of applause swept through the room as he walked to the podium. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. He recounted the moment on the subway when he had offered his seat to Grace, describing how that seemingly insignificant act had set off a chain reaction that reshaped his life. "What I learned," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his journey, "is that kindness is never wasted. Even the smallest gesture can plant a seed that grows in ways we can't foresee. And sometimes when we're at our lowest, it's kindness that lifts us back up." As he spoke, Lucas noticed a ripple of quiet among the audience. People leaned forward in their chairs, their expressions a mix of awe and reflection. By the time he finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation. Lucas felt a surge of emotion, not from the applause itself, but from the realization that his story had touched so many lives. After the event, people approached him, eager to share their own experiences with kindness and second chances. One woman told him about how a neighbor's generosity had saved her family from eviction. A man spoke of a stranger who had helped him during a medical emergency. Each story reinforced Lucas's belief that the impact of kindness was universal, transcending age, race, and circumstance. But the most poignant encounter came from a couple who waited until the crowd had thinned to approach him. The man, tall and broad-shouldered, carried himself with a quiet dignity, while the woman beside him had a warm, familiar presence. As they introduced themselves, Lucas's heart skipped a beat. It was Grace and her husband, Martin. Although they had been involved in his journey since the beginning, seeing them here, in this moment, brought everything full circle. Grace held her daughter, now a toddler with bright eyes and a curious smile. "We couldn't miss this," Grace said, her voice filled with pride. "We had to see the difference you've made, not just for us, but for so many others." Lucas was overwhelmed. "You were the start of all this," he said, looking at Grace. "If you hadn't handed me that card, I don't know where I'd be today. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Martin shook Lucas's hand firmly. "And look at what you've done with that belief. You've taken it and turned it into something that's changing lives." The moment was bittersweet, a reminder of how interconnected their stories had become, bound together by an act of compassion. The gala marked a turning point for Lucas. In the weeks that followed, media outlets picked up his story, amplifying the reach of kindness in action. Donations poured in, allowing the community center to expand its programs and even open satellite locations in other neighborhoods. Lucas found himself at the helm of a growing movement, but he never lost sight of its core mission: to remind people of the transformative power of kindness. The recognition also brought unexpected opportunities. Lucas was invited to appear on talk shows, participate in panel discussions, and collaborate with other organizations focused on social impact. Each event was a chance to share his message, to inspire others to see kindness not as a fleeting act, but as a way of life. Yet, amidst the accolades and expansion, Lucas remained grounded. He continued to spend his days at the original community center, teaching workshops and mentoring young people like Jordan, who had now become a leader in his own right. For Lucas, the heart of the movement was still the one-on-one connections, the moments of empathy that reminded people they were not alone. One afternoon, as Lucas walked through the bustling center, he paused to watch a group of children working on an art project. Their laughter and creativity filled the room with a sense of joy and possibility. He thought about how far they had come, how one small moment on a subway had blossomed into a thriving network of hope and transformation. But Lucas also knew that the journey was far from over. There were still more lives to touch, more stories to uncover, and more ripples to create. And in the next chapter, Lucas would discover that the impact of kindness could extend even further than he had ever imagined, proving that one act of compassion could truly transform the world. Months after the gala, Lucas found himself busier than ever. The original community center was thriving, and 2 new locations were in the final stages of preparation, both in neighborhoods with limited access to resources. Kindness in action had become more than a campaign. It was now a movement embraced by schools, workplaces, and even local government initiatives. Yet, Amid all the growth, Lucas remained focused on the individual lives being changed. He spent his days mentoring, teaching, and listening, always listening to the stories of the people who walked through the doors of the centers. Each story reminded him why he started, why it mattered, and why it would always matter. On a crisp autumn evening, Lucas stood in the community center's main hall, overseeing the final details of an event that had been weeks in the making. The center was hosting an open house, inviting donors, volunteers, and members of the community to celebrate their collective success. The hall buzzed with activity, children laughing, parents chatting, and volunteers bustling between tables adorned with food and displays showcasing the center's programs. Lucas smiled as he watched the scene unfold, the warmth in the room a testament to what they had built together. As the event began, Lucas stepped onto a small stage at the front of the hall. The crowd quieted as he spoke, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "When I think about where we started," he said, "it amazes me how far we've come. This center isn't just a building. It's a testament to what happens when people believe in each other, when we choose kindness, when we choose to lift each other up. Every life we touch here, every skill learned, every bond formed, it's all part of something bigger than any one of us." The applause that followed was deafening, a wave of appreciation that swept through the room. As Lucas stepped down from the stage, he was immediately surrounded by well-wishers, each eager to share their gratitude and admiration. But among the crowd, one couple caught his eye, Grace and Martin. Seeing them always brought back memories of that pivotal subway ride, the moment that had changed everything. Grace approached him with a warm smile, her young daughter holding tightly to her hand. "Lucas, it's incredible what you've accomplished," she said. "Every time we visit, it feels like there's more life, more hope, more connection. You've turned a single act of kindness into something so much bigger." Martin nodded in agreement, his expression one of quiet pride. "You've built something that will outlast all of us. Lucas, that's the greatest legacy anyone could hope for." Lucas shook his head humbly. "It started with you, Grace. If you hadn't handed me that card, I wouldn't be here. And Martin, you gave me a chance when I needed it most. None of this would exist without your belief in me." As they talked, Lucas noticed another figure standing nearby, watching with a hesitant smile. It was Jordan, now taller and more self-assured than ever. He had recently transitioned from apprentice to full-time staff at the center, his natural leadership shining through in every task he took on. Jordan approached the group, his hands in his pockets but his posture confident. "Hey Lucas," Jordan began, his voice steady. "I just wanted to say thanks for everything. Working here, learning from you, it's changed my life. I'm even starting to think about how I can help others, like you've helped me." Lucas placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder, his pride evident. "That's what it's all about, Jordan. Paying it forward. You've got what it takes to make a real difference, and I can't wait to see where you go from here." The moment was interrupted by the sound of clinking glasses, signaling the start of a toast. A volunteer stood at the front of the room, holding a microphone. "Tonight, we're celebrating all of you," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "But most of all, we're celebrating Lucas Allen, whose vision, resilience, and kindness have brought us together. Lucas, you've shown us that one person can truly make a difference, and we're all better for it." The room erupted in cheers, and Lucas felt a surge of emotion that left him momentarily speechless. As the crowd lifted their glasses, he glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the people who had become part of his journey. He saw Grace and Martin, whose compassion had sparked everything, Jordan, whose potential had flourished in ways Lucas never expected, and the countless others whose lives had been touched by the center. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Lucas stepped outside to catch a moment of quiet. The cool night air was refreshing, and he took a deep breath, letting the memories of the evening wash over him. He thought about the subway ride, about how offering his seat had seemed so small at the time. He thought about the people he had met along the way, the challenges they had faced together, and the incredible growth that had come from it all. As he stood there, Grace joined him, her daughter asleep in her arms. "It's funny," she said softly, "how life works. A simple moment on a subway, and here we are." Lucas nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It's a reminder, isn't it, that every choice we make, no matter how small, can create ripples we may never fully see. It's humbling, really. Grace smiled, her eyes reflecting the same sense of wonder. You've made those ripples into waves, Lucas, and they're reaching further than you know. Lucas looked at her, gratitude filling his heart. And it all started with you. Thank you, Grace, for seeing something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. As they returned to the warmth of the center, Lucas knew this was more than just an ending, it was a beginning. The ripples of kindness they had created would continue to grow, touching lives in ways they might never witness. And for Lucas, that was enough. But as the ripples stretched further, they would take on a life of their own, inspiring a legacy of kindness that would transform not just a community, but the world. In the months following the open house, Lucas's work expanded beyond anything he could have envisioned. The community center had become more than a place of learning. It was now a symbol of hope for Detroit and a model for other cities seeking to foster connection and resilience. Every week, Lucas received letters and emails from people whose lives had been touched by the initiative. Some were from individuals who had attended workshops and found new careers. Others were from parents whose children had discovered confidence and purpose through mentorship programs. Each story reinforced Lucas's belief in the boundless power of kindness. As kindness in action grew, so too did the demand for Lucas's guidance. He began traveling to other cities, meeting with local leaders, and helping them establish their own centers modeled after the one in Detroit. These trips were grueling, often leaving him with little time for rest, but Lucas thrived on the energy and passion of the people he met. He saw himself in their stories, in their struggles, their doubts, and their quiet determination to make a difference. During one visit to Cleveland, Lucas met a woman named Elena, who had recently started a small community garden in her neighborhood. She shared how the garden had brought neighbors together, turning an empty lot into a vibrant space for connection and growth. Inspired by her story, Lucas invited Elena to visit Detroit and see the community center in action. The experience left her determined to expand her efforts, and with Lucas's support, she secured funding to open a community center of her own. Watching Elena's dream take root reminded Lucas of how Grace had once believed in him, and how that belief had set everything in motion. Back in Detroit, the original community center continued to flourish. Jordan, now a trusted leader within the organization, took on a larger role, overseeing new programs and mentoring an ever-growing number of young people. His transformation was nothing short of remarkable, and Lucas often marveled at how far the once aimless teenager had come. One afternoon, Jordan approached Lucas with an idea. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone thoughtful. "What if we started a scholarship fund for kids in the community? Something to help them go to trade school or college. It could be another way to show them what's possible." Lucas's face lit up with pride. "That's a brilliant idea, Jordan. Let's make it happen." Together, they worked to launch the scholarship program, naming it the Second Chances Fund. The initiative quickly gained support from donors and businesses, and within months, the first scholarships were awarded. The recipients, many of whom had faced significant hardships, spoke at a small ceremony, sharing their gratitude and their dreams for the future. As Lucas listened, he felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment, knowing that the impact of their work was reaching yet another generation. But perhaps the most profound moment came one evening when Lucas received an unexpected invitation. The Detroit City Council was hosting an event to honor individuals who had made significant contributions to the community, and Lucas was to be one of the honorees. The recognition was both humbling and surreal. As he prepared his acceptance speech, Lucas thought about the journey that had brought him to this point, the subway ride, the generosity of Grace and Martin, the struggles and triumphs along the way. On the night of the event, Lucas stood before a packed audience, his heart pounding as he approached the podium. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "When I think about what we've accomplished," he said, his voice steady, "I'm reminded of something my mother used to say. Kindness isn't just something you do. It's who you are. I've seen that truth come to life through this work. It's not about me, it's about all of us. Every act of compassion, every moment of connection, Every person who chooses to believe in the good, we're building something bigger than ourselves. And it all starts with a simple choice. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Lucas's mind was already on what lay ahead. He knew there were still countless lives to touch, still so much work to be done. But he also knew he wasn't alone in this journey. The movement had taken on a life of its own, carried forward by the countless individuals who had embraced its message. In the days that followed, Lucas received messages from people inspired by his speech. Some wanted to start their own initiatives, while others simply thanked him for reminding them of the power of kindness. Among the messages was a letter from a young woman in Kansas who had read about kindness in action online. She wrote about how a small gesture from a stranger, a warm meal during a difficult time, had given her the strength to keep going. "Your story reminded me," she wrote, "that kindness is everywhere, even when it feels like the world is falling apart." Lucas kept that letter in his desk, a reminder of why he had chosen this path. He often shared it with Jordan and the other mentors at the center, using it to illustrate how every small act could ripple outward in ways they might never see. Years passed, and the movement continued to grow. Lucas, now older and wiser, often found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with one simple decision to stand up and offer his seat. The community center in Detroit remained his heart and soul, but its impact had spread far beyond the city. New centers had opened across the country, each one a testament to the enduring power of human connection. One day, as Lucas stood in the bustling hall of the original center, watching children play and adults learn, Grace appeared at his side. Her daughter, now a bright and curious young girl, ran ahead to join a group of kids at an art table. Grace turned to Lucas with a smile. "It's amazing, isn't it?" she said. "What's grown from that one moment on the subway?" Lucas nodded, his eyes misty with emotion. "It's more than I ever imagined, and it's still just the beginning." As the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow through the windows, Lucas felt a profound sense of peace. The ripples of kindness they had created would continue to grow, touching lives in ways they might never fully understand. And in that moment, Lucas knew with absolute certainty that the legacy they had built would endure, a shining reminder of the power of compassion and the extraordinary things that can happen when we choose to care for one another. Years later, Lucas found himself sitting in the quiet of his small office at the original community center. The desk was the same one he had used when sketching out the earliest ideas for the center, though now it was adorned with mementos of a life devoted to service, photographs of smiling children, newspaper clippings celebrating the milestones of kindness in action, and thank you letters from people whose lives had been changed. Despite all the accolades and expansion, Lucas remained the same humble man who had once wondered if his life had any purpose left. The world around him had indeed transformed, and the ripples of his initial actions were now waves that stretched far and wide. Hundreds of community centers across the country bore the philosophy that had guided him: small acts of kindness could change everything. The movement had grown into an international phenomenon, with people in cities and towns across the globe adopting the principles of kindness in action. Lucas had been invited to speak in places as far-flung as Tokyo, Johannesburg, and Sao Paulo, his message transcending cultural and language barriers. But today was not about speeches or interviews, it was about home. The community center was hosting an anniversary celebration to mark 20 years since its founding. As the center filled with guests, Lucas watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. Familiar faces mingled with new ones, each person a living testament to the power of connection and compassion. Jordan, now a seasoned leader within the organization, took the stage to address the crowd. His voice was confident and steady as he recounted the early days of the center, sharing stories of how it had given him not just skills, but purpose. "This place," Jordan said, "is more than just walls and programs. It's where people find hope, where they discover that they matter. And it's all thanks to one man who taught us that kindness is the strongest foundation we can build on." The crowd erupted in applause, and Lucas felt a familiar pang of humility as the attention shifted to him. Jordan beckoned him to the stage, and as Lucas rose, The audience stood, their cheers and clapping a wave of gratitude that washed over him. Standing at the podium, Lucas looked out at the sea of faces young and old, familiar and new, and took a deep breath. "When I think back to where this all began," he started, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm reminded of something that stayed with me all these years. Kindness isn't about grand gestures or being a hero. It's about the small things, the moments when we choose to see each other, to care, to act. 20 years ago, I was just a man on a subway, weighed down by my own struggles. But a simple act of kindness changed everything, not just for me, but for so many others. That's the beauty of kindness. It grows, it spreads, and it transforms." He paused, scanning the crowd, his gaze landing on Grace and Martin, who stood near the front with their daughter, now a young woman who volunteered at the center. Their smiles were full of pride and encouragement, the same qualities that had defined their relationship with Lucas from the very beginning. "This center," Lucas continued, "is proof that we are all connected. Every act of compassion creates ripples that touch lives in ways we may never see. And those ripples become waves, changing communities, cities, and even the world. I'm not standing here because of what I've done. I'm standing here because of what we've done together. This is your legacy as much as it is mine." The applause was deafening, but Lucas's thoughts were elsewhere. He thought about the young man he had been on that subway, desperate, defeated, and uncertain of his future. He thought about Grace, who had seen something in him worth believing in, and Martin, who had given him the chance to rebuild. He thought about Jordan, who had gone from a restless teenager to a pillar of his community, and all the others who had found hope within these walls. As the celebration continued, Lucas moved through the crowd, greeting old friends and meeting new faces. A young woman approached him, her hands clutching a notebook filled with sketches and notes. "Mr. Allen," she began nervously, "I just wanted to thank you. I'm starting a center like this in my hometown, and it's all because of what I've learned here. Your story showed me that even the smallest act can create something incredible." Lucas smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's the real power of kindness," he said. "It's not about what we do alone. It's about what we inspire in others. You're going to do amazing things, I can already see it." Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the guests began to leave, Lucas found himself alone in the main hall. The quiet felt like an old friend, comforting and familiar. He walked slowly through the space, his footsteps echoing softly against the walls adorned with photographs and murals. Each image told a story: a child learning a new skill, a family finding support, a volunteer sharing their time. He stopped in front of a mural painted years ago, depicting a ripple spreading outward from a single drop of water. Beneath it was a simple inscription: "One act of kindness can change the world." Lucas traced the words with his fingertips, his heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. As he turned to leave, the door opened, and Grace stepped inside, her face lit by the warm glow of the hall's lights. "Couldn't resist one last look?" she asked, her tone teasing but affectionate. Lucas chuckled softly, just taking it all in. "It still amazes me. What started with a seat on the subway has turned into this." Grace nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's more than a legacy, Lucas. It's a reminder of what we're capable of when we choose to care. And that reminder will live on, long after any of us." Lucas smiled, his heart at peace. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, he looked up at the stars, feeling the weight of his journey lift, replaced by a profound sense of fulfillment. The ripples of his actions had grown into waves, touching lives across the world. And though he knew his time might be limited, the legacy of kindness they had built would endure, a beacon of hope for generations to come. Lucas's story is a testament to the extraordinary power of kindness, a reminder that even the smallest actions can create waves of change. But this story isn't just about Lucas, it's about all of us. Each one of us has the power to make a difference, to start a ripple that transforms lives. If this story inspired you, I invite you to join our growing community of kindness by subscribing to this channel. By doing so, you'll gain access to more incredible stories, practical lessons, and powerful reminders of the good we can achieve together. And don't stop there. Let's spread this message even further. Share this video with someone who inspires you, someone who might need a little hope today, or someone ready to create their own ripple of kindness. Leave a comment below and tell us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you had the chance to pay it forward. Let's inspire each other, one story at a time. Finally, don't forget to explore the other videos on this channel. Whether you're looking for stories of compassion, tips for building a better community, or ways to grow and heal, there's something here for everyone. Together, we can make kindness the foundation of a brighter world. Thank you for watching, and remember, one small act of kindness can change everything. See you in the next video.